car park was filling quickly. The occasional limousine pulled into the school's front entrance. Young men and women emerged into the fresh night air, guys in dinner suits and the girls in various gowns. Laughter and excited chatter filled the air around the auditorium entrance as the students made their way inside for the graduation ball. Girls were giving themselves a final preening in compact mirrors everywhere, checking lipstick and hair just one more time. The boys were standing in circles, pulling at the ties around their necks as if they were a noose, or absent-mindedly trying to slide their hands into pockets that were no longer at their waists. Rachel's mum dropped her off out the front and gave her a kiss before she stepped out of the car. "You look beautiful," she told her daughter. "Thanks, Mum," said Rachel, but Rachel hardly cared how she looked. Her mind was racing with thoughts and fears of the vision she had experienced about this night years before. There was Tamara, walking hand in hand with Craig. She looked like a model with her blonde hair pulled and pinned into an elegant style. Rachel approached her friends uneasily. Tamara was wearing the same emerald green dress, the one that Rachel had seen covered in blood in her vision. She tried to blink the image and the tears away out of her eyes. She had made up her mind that tonight, no matter what, she was going to stay by Tamara's side, to see if somehow she could prevent the tragedy she had witnessed through her mind's eye. Maybe if she stayed with Tamara, she might be able to change her friend's mind about getting into the car with Craig. Or maybe she'd get his car keys. Maybe she could do something, anything. If she was going to see the future, then she might as well be a part of it. Tamara and Craig both gave Rachel a hug and a kiss as they met on the auditorium steps. Craig already had alcohol in his breath. They entered the foyer together and stepped forwards onto the dance floor, filled with excited teens and loud music. Every now and then, Rachel would see Craig turn away from the crowd as he took a swig on a small hip flask he had hidden in his pocket. He and Tamara were laughing and dancing, a picture of happiness. Rachel grabbed a guy she sort of knew and dragged him out onto the dance floor. Not far from Tamara and Craig, so that she could keep an eye on them. She danced distractedly with this poor guy. She could have been dancing on her own for all she knew, only for the fact that he was trying to make conversation with her. "What was that? Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I think so. It was obvious that she wasn't listening. After half an hour of him persistently trying to register even an ounce of her attention, he simply shrugged his shoulders and walked off into the crowd to get a drink. It was another 5 minutes before Rachel even missed him and realised that she'd been dancing on her own, even to a slow number. She felt like a dag, but she really didn't care. Tamara and Craig were still swaying arm in arm to the music. They seemed hardly aware of anyone else around them, let alone to the danger ahead. Rachel gave up looking for another dance partner and just continued on making her way around the dance floor on her own, still keeping an eye on her friends. She ended up over near the drinks table. Two guys were engaged in a rowdy conversation about a football game they had played in on the weekend before. One guy made the motions for a leaping catch he had made. As he came back down to earth, he bumped into the back of a pimply-faced, red-headed girl who had just gotten a couple of drinks for her and a date. This sent her spearing forwards as she lost her balance in the pair of high heels she'd borrowed from her mother. She finally regained her balance, coming to an abrupt halt as she crashed into Rachel, covering the front of Rachel's dress with collar. "I'm so sorry," the redhead stammered. "Here, let me help you." The two guys laughed as the girl did her best to mop up Rachel's ruined gown with a tea towel from the drink table. Rachel kept insisting it was okay and she would fix it by herself, but the poor embarrassed girl would not back off. Finally, after yet another apology, she let Rachel go on her way. It was getting late. Rachel scanned the crowd for her friends. They were no longer in the spot where she'd seen them last. She started to panic as she pushed her way through gyrating bodies and past couples locked in dreamy embraces. She couldn't find them. She spotted one of Craig's friends. "Where are they?" she begged him. "Where's Craig and Tamara?" "They left already," he said. "They went to get some beer for the after-party up at Gaz's place. You can come too if you want to." He gave her a sickly wink over the shoulder of a dark-haired girl. His eyes looked like she should have already been home in bed. She passed a sneering gaze over Rachel, baring her teeth slightly in what could have been loosely classed as a smile, before turning attention back to her dance partner. She threw her arms around his neck and pressed her forehead to his, which Rachel thought looked more like an effort to stay upright than a show of affection. She was too late. What was she going to do now? She forced her way through the crowd and plunged outside into the cold night air. Rachel ran out in the car park, desperately trying to find Craig's car, in case they might not have left already. As she burst through a line of cars, a set of headlights way to right shone directly at her. She looked away quickly, but the shapes of the two bulbs had set themselves in her eyes as a pair of coloured blobs. They stayed with her, even as she tried to blink them away. She put her hands over her eyes and watched the coloured blobs, waiting for the blindness to pass. She pulled her hands down from her face. She could make out the dash lights of the car. The CD player was turned way up, and Tamara's laughter could only just be heard in the front passenger seat. Craig was singing along with the CD, loudly and out of tune. Rachel looked around her. She was sitting in the back seat of Craig's car. She reached over into the front seat and grabbed Tamara's shoulder to let her know that she was there. Tamara ignored her and just went on laughing. Rachel tried to yell over the noise of the vehicle, but it was no use. They couldn't hear or see her. Just at that moment, the car began to lurch sideways. Then it broadsided to the left, and Rachel felt the vehicle beginning to tilt, as if it were leaning into a corner, but then it leant even further. As the vehicle began to roll, she could hear Tamara's terrified screaming. Rachel threw herself forwards and grabbed onto Tamara and the passenger side seat. As the vehicle became airborne, Rachel held on tighter and tighter. The colours began to appear, swirling and spiralling upwards, higher and higher into a circle of white light. Rachel was no longer being thrown about in the car. It was as if all motion had ceased. The only thing that Rachel was now aware of was the blinding light that surrounded her and Tamara. Then suddenly, that was it. Nothing. The light was gone. Rachel opened her eyes. She was standing alone on an embankment, looking down towards the scene of a car crash. It was dark, but the fire rescue vehicle had large spotlights trained onto the wreck to assist the fire crews. They were using hydraulic cutters to remove the vehicle's roof, to give them access to the people trapped in the car. The ambulance was parked atop the embankment, not far from Rachel. She noticed a large number of moths that were attracted to the still flashing light on its roof. A couple of paramedics made their way down to the wreck with a stretcher. "There's a girl here, on the passenger side," a fireman called out. "She's still alive." Tamara is freed from the wreckage and placed into a spinal brace as a precaution before being carried up the hill. The paramedics carried her straight past Rachel, who was standing on long grass on the embankment. They didn't seem to notice her. She followed them up to the back of the ambulance. Tamara, although obviously in shock, was uninjured. She was going to live. The tears streamed down Rachel's face. Another ambulance arrived as the ambulance that carried Tamara sped away towards town with its sirens blazing. Rachel watched as Craig was brought up the hill. The passenger side of his body was unscathed, but the side of his face that had been away from the light was barely recognisable. "Craig Huskins is the name on the driver's licence," said the fireman to the police officer. "We don't know if he's going to make it or not. Darn kids get a few drinks in them and drive like maniacs." "Damn shame," said the policeman. "I still can't believe why some guy would want to go for a drive when he's just been out all night to his graduation party. He must have known he'd had too much to drink." "Hey, get off the road." The door was shut on the second ambulance. Rachel could hear its siren as it screamed away into the night with Craig on board. "Hey, move or I'll run you over." Rachel pulled her hands away from her eyes, only to find that she was now standing in the middle of the car park driveway. There were a line of cars waiting for her to move, and people were becoming impatient. She slowly staggered sideways out of the car's headlights. People were crowding into the car park from everywhere, it seemed. A group of teenagers walked past her on the way to their cars. She could overhear their conversation. "Yeah, there's an accident out on Falls Road. My mum just rang me on the mobile to make sure I was okay. Apparently it's someone from school." "Bad?" "Yeah, pretty bad." She couldn't make out any more of what they were saying. As she looked back across towards the auditorium steps, she could make out her parents' car. Mum was anxiously checking each group of teens as they left, desperately trying to find Rachel. "Mum, I'm here," Rachel called out to her as she got to the car. "Oh, thank God you're all right," said her distraught mother. She grabbed Rachel's hand. "Rachel, there's been an accident. Tamara and Craig. Tamara's mum rang me from the hospital. Tamara's going to be all right, but she's been asking for you. They don't think Craig's going to make it, though. Rachel, I'm so sorry. I'm just so grateful that you weren't in the car with them." Rachel sighed heavily as she settled into the welcome warmth of the car. She felt exhausted. It was as if the night's proceedings had sapped all of her energy. Tamara was okay. She had been able to change the course in which her vision had played out. It was huge relief in one way. In another way, though, now she'd taken on a huge responsibility. No longer just observing, but actually participating in the future's events as they unfolded. Her mother took her home to change before driving Rachel to the hospital to see her friend.